On the day of his grand wedding, billionaire Leonardo Antunes thought he had it all: wealth, power, and a beautiful young bride. But when an unexpected guest arrives with a shocking secret, his perfect life is shattered. What happens when love turns into the ultimate scandal? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom sparkled under the light of crystal chandeliers. White roses and lilies adorned every table, their sweet scent filling the air. It was the wedding day of Leonardo Antunes, the 55-year-old technology mogul whose fortune was estimated at billions, and Carolina Vasquez, his beautiful 27-year-old bride. Leonardo stood by the bar, his custom Italian tuxedo fitting his tall frame perfectly. Despite being in his 50s, he maintained a distinguished appearance, with salt and pepper hair and keen blue eyes that had helped him close countless business deals. "Today is the happiest day of my life," Leonardo told his best friend and business partner, Roberto Mendes, who stood beside him. Roberto raised his champagne glass. "After all these years alone, you deserve this happiness. Carolina is perfect. For you." Leonardo's eyes found Carolina across the room. She was breathtaking in her designer wedding gown, her dark hair cascading down her back in soft waves. Her smile lit up her delicate features as she chatted with guests. "I never thought I'd fall in love again after Maria died," Leonardo said, his voice softening at the mention of his late wife who had passed away from cancer 10 years ago. "But Carolina, she brought life back into my world." What Leonardo didn't to know was that an uninvited guest had just entered the reception hall. Elena Ferreira, a 75-year-old woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, stood at the entrance, leaning on her walking cane. Her eyes, still sharp despite her age, scanned the room until they found Leonardo. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked her companion Luisa, Elena's caretaker. Elena gripped her cane tighter. "I've kept this secret for too long. I promised Beatrice on her deathbed that I would tell the truth." On the dance floor, Carolina laughed as her maid of honor, Daniela, whispered something in her ear. She felt like she was living a fairy tale. 6 months ago, she had been a simple event planner working on Leonardo's charity gala. Now she was Mrs. Antunes, married to one of the most powerful men in the country. "I still can't believe you caught Brazil's most eligible bachelor," Daniela said, a hint of envy in her voice. "It's not about his money," Carolina replied, watching Leonardo with adoration. "He treats me like I'm the most precious thing in his world." At that moment, the wedding planner announced it was time for the couple's first dance. Leonardo crossed the room and extended his hand to Carolina. As they moved to the center of the dance floor, guests gathered around them, phones ready to capture the moment. "You've made me the happiest man alive," Leonardo whispered as he held Carolina close, swaying to the romantic melody. Carolina looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "I never knew love could feel this complete." Elena watched the couple from her table, her heart heavy with the burden of the truth she carried. Beside her, Luisa placed a comforting hand on her arm. "Maybe we should wait until after the reception," Luisa suggested, but Elena shook her head. "No more waiting. This has gone too far already." As the song ended, Leonardo dipped Carolina gently, earning applause from their guests. The couple sealed the dance with a tender kiss. The wedding coordinator approached with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the toasts." Roberto stood up first, raising his glass. "To Leonardo and Carolina. May your love story be filled with happiness, prosperity, and many beautiful chapters." The guests cheered and drank to the couple's happiness. Leonardo's sister, Patricia, went next, followed by Daniela. Just as Leonardo was about to thank everyone for coming, Elena pushed herself to her feet, her hands trembling. "I have something to say," she called out, her voice surprisingly strong for her age. The room quieted, all eyes turning to the elderly woman no one seemed to recognize. Leonardo frowned. "I'm sorry, Mom, but who are you?" Elena straightened her shoulders. "My name is Elena Ferreira. I was Beatrice, Vasquez's closest friend." Carolina stiffened at the mention of her mother's name. "You knew my mother?" "Yes, child. I knew her very well. I was with her until the day she died last year." Leonardo stepped forward, confusion written across his face. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. How do you know, Beatrice?" Elena's eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Leonardo, Beatrice and I worked as housekeepers for your family 30 years ago. Before you took over your father's company." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Carolina looked at Leonardo, confusion evident in her expression. "That's impossible," Leonardo said. "I would have remembered you." "You were often away at university," Elena replied, "but when you came home during the summer of 1994, you and Beatrice became close." Leonardo's face paled as fragments of memory began to surface. A beautiful young housekeeper with a shy smile, secret meetings in the garden, promises whispered. "In the dark." "Beatrice was fired suddenly," Elena continued. "Your father discovered the relationship and sent her away. What no one knew was that she was already carrying your child." The room fell completely silent. Carolina's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you saying?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Elena pulled an old envelope from her purse. "Beatrice never told you the truth about your father, Carolina. She was afraid of the Antunes family's power, but before she died, she made me promise to give you this." Carolina's hands shook as she took the envelope. Inside was a birth certificate and a faded photograph of a younger Beatrice standing next to Leonardo. "No," Leonardo said, his voice hoarse. "This can't be true." But as he looked at Carolina, really looked at her, recognition dawned on his face. Her eyes, they were the same striking blue as his mother's, the same blue that he saw in the mirror every day. "Stop this wedding!" Elena's voice rang out through the stunned silence. "Leonardo, Carolina is your daughter." The words seemed to echo in the vast ballroom. Gasps and shocked exclamations erupted from the guests. Carolina swayed on her feet, her face draining of all color. "That's not possible," she whispered, though doubt was already creeping into her mind. Her mother had always been vague about her father, saying only that he was a wealthy man who hadn't wanted a family. Leonardo reached for the birth certificate with trembling hands. There it was, in black and white. Carolina Beatriz Vasquez, born February 15, 1995, almost exactly 9 months after his summer affair with Beatrice. "I didn't know," he said, his voice breaking. "Beatrice never told me she was pregnant. My father said she left to take care of a sick relative." Patricia rushed to her brother's side. "This is outrageous. You can't just barge in here with these claims." But Elena wasn't finished. From her purse, she produced another document. "Beatrice saved a strand of your hair, Leonardo. Before she died, I had a DNA test done. It proves that you are Carolina's biological father." The room spun around. Carolina. Memories flashed through her mind. How Leonardo had remarked on their similar tastes when they first met. How comfortable she had felt with him from the beginning. How everyone said they had the same laugh. "Oh God," she whispered, stumbling backward. Daniela caught her before she could fall. Leonardo stood frozen, the truth crashing down on him like a physical weight. He had married his own daughter. The knowledge was unbearable. Roberto quickly took charge of the situation. "Everyone, please give the family some privacy. This reception is over." Guests began to file out in shocked silence, the scandal already spreading through whispered conversations and discreet text messages. In a private room off the main hall, Carolina sat with her head in her hands, her wedding dress pooled around her like a cruel joke. "Why didn't she tell me?" she sobbed. "All these years." Leonardo paced the room, unable to look at Carolina. "I would have taken responsibility. I would have been there for you both." Elena sat quietly in the corner. The burden of her promise finally lifted. "Beatrice was afraid of your father, Leonardo. He threatened to destroy her if she ever contacted you again." Patricia stormed into the room, her face flushed with anger. "This will ruin us. The press will have a field day." "Yo, that's all you care about," Leonardo snapped. "This isn't about our reputation. This is about—" He couldn't finish the sentence, the horror of their situation too great to put into words. Carolina looked up, her makeup streaked with tears. "What happens now?" "The marriage? It can't be legal, can it?" "No," Roberto said, entering the room with a grim expression. It will be annulled immediately, as if it never happened. But they all knew that wasn't true. Nothing could erase what had transpired between them, the feelings they had shared, believing they were falling in love when in reality it had been the unconscious pull of blood relation all along. As night fell over the city, the Grand Plaza hotel emptied of wedding guests, leaving behind only the remnants of what should have been a day of celebration. In their separate rooms, Leonardo and Carolina faced the wreckage of their lives, each grappling with a truth that had come decades too late. In her modest apartment, Elena looked at an old photograph of herself and Beatrice, taken when they were both young housekeepers with dreams of a better future. "I kept my promise, my friend," she whispered. "But at what cost?" The scandal of Leonardo Antunes marrying his own daughter would soon dominate headlines across the country. But the real story, of secrets kept too long, of lives forever altered by silence, was only just beginning to unfold. 1 week after the wedding disaster, Carolina sat in her small apartment, staring blankly at the television. News of the scandal dominated every channel. The headlines were merciless. Billionaire marries own daughter. The Antunes family scandal. Wedding turns to nightmare. She had barely slept, barely eaten. The beautiful wedding dress she had chosen with such care now lay hidden in the back of her closet, a painful reminder of the happiest day of her life that had turned into her worst nightmare. Her phone rang for the 20th time that morning. It was Daniela again. Carolina ignored it, just as she had ignored all the calls from friends, reporters, and curious acquaintances. The only calls she couldn't ignore were from the lawyers handling the annulment. A knock at the door startled her. Carolina froze, afraid it might be another journalist. They had been camping outside her building for days. "Carolina, it's Elena. Please open the door." Carolina hesitated before slowly getting up. Elena was the last person she wanted to see, but also the only one who might have answers to the questions that kept her awake at night. "How did you find me?" Carolina asked as she opened the door. Elena looked smaller, frailer than she had at the wedding. The burden of the truth seemed to have aged her even more. "Luisa helped me. May I come in?" Carolina stepped aside, allowing the elderly woman to enter. The apartment was a mess. Takeout containers piled on the coffee table, clothes strewn across the couch, tissues everywhere. "I know you must hate me," Elena said, settling slowly into an armchair. "But I had to tell the truth. It was what your mother wanted." Carolina crossed her arms, her eyes red from days of crying. "Why didn't she tell me herself? Why wait until I fell in love with... She couldn't finish the sentence. Elena pulled out an old worn envelope from her purse. "She wrote you this letter before she died. She made me promise to give it to you only if you ever met Leonardo." Carolina's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, her mother's elegant script filling several pages. "I'll give you privacy to read it," Elena said, struggling to stand. "No," Carolina said. "Stay, please." As Carolina began to read, her mother's voice seemed to fill the room. "My dearest Carolina, if you're reading this, it means Elena has fulfilled her promise, and you now know the truth about your father. I've carried this secret for too long, and I know I should have told you years ago. I met Leonardo when I was working as a housekeeper for his family. He was kind and charming, so different from his cold, calculating father. We fell in love that summer, though we both knew it couldn't last. His father, Victor Antunes, discovered our relationship and threatened to destroy my life if I didn't leave immediately. What neither of them knew was that I was already carrying you. I left without telling Leonardo, believing it was for the best. Victor paid me a small sum to disappear and never contact his son again. When you were born, I considered telling Leonardo, but fear stopped me. Victor Antunes was a powerful man with connections everywhere. I was afraid he would take you away from me, or worse. As you grew, I saw Leonardo in you every day, your blue eyes, your determination, your kind heart. I almost reached out to him after Victor died, but by then Leonardo had become a powerful man himself, and I was afraid of disrupting both your lives. I know this revelation must be devastating. I never imagined you would actually meet Leonardo, let alone fall in love with him. The universe has a cruel sense of irony. Please forgive me, my darling. Everything I did to protect you. With all my love, Mama Carolina lowered the letter, tears streaming down her face. She was trying to protect me, she whispered. Beatrice was afraid of Victor Antunes, and with good reason, Elena said. He was a ruthless man who valued his family's reputation above all else. When he found out about Beatrice and Leonardo, he threatened to have her deported back to Colombia, where her family was struggling to survive. Carolina wiped her tears. But why didn't she tell me after Victor died? By then you were already a grown woman building your own life. She didn't want to disrupt everything with this revelation. Eleanor paused. None of us could have predicted you would meet Leonardo at that charity event. It felt like fate. Carolina said bitterly. From the moment we met, there was this connection between us. I thought it was love, but it was just biology. Across town, in his penthouse office, Leonardo stared out at the city skyline, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The past week had been the worst of his life. His company's stock had plummeted, business partners were distancing themselves, and the board was calling for him to step down temporarily. The door opened, and Roberto entered without knocking. "You can't keep hiding up here forever. Watch." "Me," Leonardo replied, taking another sip of whiskey. Roberto took the glass from his friend's hand. "This isn't going to solve anything." "Nothing can solve this, Roberto. I married my own daughter." Leonardo's voice broke as he said the words out loud. "The annulment is being processed. Legally, it will be as if the marriage never happened." Leonardo laughed bitterly. "But it did happen. I fell in love with my own child without knowing it. What kind of man does that make me?" "A man who didn't know the truth," Roberto insisted. "You're not to blame for this. Tell that to the press. Tell that to Carolina, whose life I've ruined." Roberto placed a folder on the desk. "These are the results of the DNA test our lawyers had done. It confirms what Elena said. The paternity match is undeniable." Leonardo closed his eyes, the last shred of hope that this might all be a terrible mistake vanishing. "Does she know?" The results were sent to her lawyers as well. Leonardo poured himself another drink. "I need to see her, to apologize, to explain." "Is that wise? The media is watching your every move." "I don't care about the media. I care about her." At that moment, Patricia burst into the office, her face flushed with anger. "Have you seen this?" She threw a tabloid magazine on the desk. On the cover was a grainy photograph of Leonardo and Carolina kissing at the wedding, with the headline, "Father-Daughter Forbidden Love." "This is destroying our family name," Patricia snapped. "The company is in freefall. You need to make a say." Public statement denying any prior knowledge of this relationship. Leonardo glared at his sister. "Is that all you care about? The company, the family name? What about Carolina? What about what this is doing to her?" "She's your daughter, not your wife," Patricia said coldly. "You need to remember that." Leonardo slammed his glass down. "Get out." Patricia hesitated, then turned and left, slamming the door behind her. "She's right about one thing," Roberto said cautiously. "You do need to make a public statement, but it should be one of compassion, not denial." Leonardo nodded, his mind already elsewhere. "Find out where Carolina is staying. I need to talk to her." Back in Carolina's apartment, Elena had made tea and was sitting quietly while Carolina processed everything. "What happens now?" Carolina finally asked. "That's up to you, child, but know that none of this is your fault. You didn't know." Carolina shook her head. "But now I do know. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face and I remember how I felt about him. How can I ever move past that?" "Time," Elena said simply. "And perhaps someday forgiveness, for your mother, for Leonardo, and most importantly, for yourself." A phone call interrupted them. Carolina checked the screen and frowned. "It's Daniela again. You should answer. You need your friends now more than ever." Carolina reluctantly picked up. "Daniela, I told you I don't want to talk." "Carolina, turn on channel 6 right now," Daniela interrupted, her voice urgent. Carolina grabbed the remote and switched channels. Leonardo was on screen, standing at a podium surrounded by reporters. "I want to address the situation that has become public knowledge," he was saying, his face haggard, dark circles under his eyes. Last week I learned that Carolina Vasquez, the woman I married, is my biological daughter, a fact neither of us knew until the revelation at our wedding reception. Carolina turned up the volume, her heart pounding. I want to make it absolutely clear that neither Carolina nor I had any knowledge of our true relationship. The marriage has been annulled, but the damage to both our lives is immeasurable. Leonardo paused, visibly struggling with his emotions. To Carolina, if you're watching this, I want to say how deeply sorry I am. I never knew about your mother's pregnancy. I never knew you existed as my daughter. Had I known, I would have been there for you from the beginning. I hope that someday you can forgive me and perhaps, he hesitated, perhaps we can find a way to have some kind of relationship as father and daughter. Carolina covered her mouth, fresh tears streaming down her face. I will be stepping back from my role as CEO temporarily to deal with this personal matter. I ask for privacy for both Carolina and myself during this difficult time. With that, Leonardo walked away from the podium, ignoring the barrage of questions from reporters. "Oh my God," Carolina whispered, turning off the TV. "He seems sincere," Elena observed. "It doesn't matter. How can I ever face him again? How can I look at the man I thought I was in love with and see him as my father?" Before Elena could respond, Carolina's phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. She answered hesitantly. "Carolina, it's Roberto Mendez, Leonardo's friend. He wants to meet with you privately. No press, no lawyers, just the two of you." Carolina's breath caught in her throat. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please," Roberto said. "He's not handling this well. He needs to talk to you, to apologize in person." Carolina looked at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. "Tell him I'll think about it," Carolina finally said before hanging up. "You should meet him," Elena said. "For closure, if nothing else." What would I even say to him? "Sorry our wedding was a disaster, Daddy." Carolina's voice dripped with sarcasm. "You'll find the words when the time comes. You both need to heal from this." That evening, after Elena had left, Carolina stood by her window, looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Carolina, it's Leonardo. Please meet me tomorrow at the Botanical Gardens at 10 a.m. Just us. No press. I understand if you don't want to see me, but I hope you'll come." Carolina stared at the message for a long time before typing a simple response. "I'll be there." In his empty penthouse, Leonardo sat in darkness, the glow of his phone illuminating his tired face as Carolina's reply came through. A mixture of relief and dread washed over him. Tomorrow he would face the daughter he never knew he had, the woman he had fallen in love with. Meanwhile, in a luxurious apartment across town, Patricia Antunes paced nervously, her phone pressed to her ear. "The situation is getting out of hand," she hissed. "Leonardo is becoming emotionally involved. If he establishes a relationship with her as his daughter, she'll have a claim to the Antunes fortune." "So you want me to do what exactly?" asked the voice on the other end. "Find something, anything we can use against this girl. I will not let the empire my father built be divided because of some housekeeper's daughter." As she hung up, Patricia glanced at a photograph on her desk. A young Leonardo with their father, Victor. "I'm protecting what's ours, father," she whispered, "just as you taught me." The night deepened, and across the city 3 people lay awake, Carolina, Leonardo, and Patricia, each contemplating the meeting that would take place the next day, each unaware of how it would change their lives forever. The botanical gardens, with their peaceful pathways and colorful blooms, would soon become the setting for the next chapter in this tangled web of secrets, revelations, and the impossible search for redemption. The botanical gardens were quiet that morning, the early autumn air crisp and cool. Carolina arrived first, choosing a secluded bench near the rose garden. She had barely slept, rehearsing what she would say to Leonardo over and over in her mind, but finding no words that seemed adequate for the situation they found themselves. She wore simple jeans and a blue sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup could hide the dark circles under her eyes or the paleness of her complexion. A week ago she had been a blushing bride. Now she was... what exactly? A daughter, a victim, a curiosity for the tabloids. At precisely 10 a.m. Leonardo appeared, on the path, looking nothing like the confident CEO she had fallen in love with. His shoulders were hunched, his face unshaven, his expensive clothes wrinkled as if he had slept in them. When he spotted her, he hesitated, uncertainty written across his face. Carolina's heart clenched at the sight of him. Part of her wanted to run away, but another part, a part she wasn't ready to acknowledge, felt a strange pull toward this man who was her biological father. "Thank you for coming," Leonardo said as he approached, stopping a respectful distance. From the bench. "I almost didn't," Carolina admitted. Leonardo gestured to the space beside her. "May I?" She nodded and he sat down, careful to maintain space between them. For a long moment neither spoke. The sound of birds and the distant laughter of children playing somewhere in the gardens filled the silence. "I don't know where to begin," Leonardo finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "Neither do I," Carolina replied. "A part of me still can't believe this is happening." Leonardo turned to look at her, really look at her, seeing not the woman he had believed he was in love with, but the daughter he never knew he had. "You have my mother's eyes," he said softly. "How did I not see it before?" Carolina glanced away, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. "Eleanor gave me a letter from my mother. She said she was afraid of your father." Leonardo nodded grimly. "My father was a harsh man, controlling, obsessed with the family legacy and reputation. He would have seen Beatrice as a threat to everything he had built." "That doesn't excuse what she did," Carolina said, a flash of anger in her voice. "She kept me from knowing my father my entire life. And from me knowing I had a daughter," Leonardo added, his expression pained. "I've missed so much, your first steps, your first words, your graduations, and now we're here," Carolina said, gesturing vaguely. "Strangers who are bound by blood, strangers who almost—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Leonardo winced. "Carolina, I need you to know that what happened between us—" "Don't," she interrupted sharply. "I can't talk about that, not now. Maybe not ever." He nodded, respecting her boundaries. "Then let's talk about what happens next. The press won't leave us alone. The company is in turmoil. My sister is—" He hesitated. "What about your sister?" Carolina asked. "Patricia is concerned about what this means for the family business. She's always been protective of our father's legacy." "You mean she's worried?" "I'll try to claim my share of the Antunes' fortune," Carolina said bluntly. Leonardo looked surprised. "Is that what you want?" "I want my life back." Carolina's voice rose with sudden emotion. "I want to wake up and discover this was all a bad dream. I want to not be confused and disgusted every time I think about my feelings for you. I want to not be a tabloid headline." Leonardo reached out instinctively to comfort her, then pulled back his hand, remembering his new role in her life. "I'm so sorry," he said helplessly. Carolina took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "I don't want your money, Leonardo. I just want to find a way to move forward from this nightmare." "I want that too," he said earnestly. "And I want a chance to be in your life, Carolina. Not as what we thought we were to each other, but as your father, if you'll allow it." Carolina looked away, conflicted emotions battling within her. "I don't know if I can do that." Before Leonardo could respond, they were interrupted by the sudden click and whir of cameras. From behind the nearby shrubbery, two photographers emerged, capturing frame after frame of their private moment. "Ms. Vasquez, how does it feel to discover your fiancé is your father?" one shouted. "Mr. Antunes, was there ever any suspicion about your relationship?" called the other. Leonardo jumped to his feet, fury replacing his earlier vulnerability. "Get out of here, this is a private conversation." Carolina stood up, panic washing over her. "They followed us, how did they know we'd be here?" Leonardo moved protectively in front of her, shielding her from the cameras. "Let's go, my car is nearby." They hurried down the garden path, the photographers in pursuit. More seemed to appear from behind trees and bushes, a coordinated ambush that had clearly been planned. Leonardo led Carolina to a side exit, where his driver waited with a black SUV. They climbed in quickly, and the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the photographers scrambling for their own vehicles. "How did they know?" Carolina asked again, her breathing ragged with distress. Leonardo's expression darkened. "Someone must have tipped them off. The only people who knew about this meeting were Roberto, you and me. And Elena," Carolina added. "I told her about it." Would she have told anyone? Carolina shook her head firmly. No, she's been nothing but supportive. Then someone else is involved, Leonardo said grimly, pulling out his phone. He dialed Roberto's number. Roberto, we were ambushed by the press at the gardens. Did you tell anyone about the meeting? He listened for a moment, then his expression hardened. I see. We'll talk later. He hung up and turned to Carolina. Roberto mentioned the meeting to his assistant while scheduling my day. The leak could have come from there. Carolina wasn't convinced, or it could have been someone else entirely. Across town, Patricia sat in her office, looking at the text message on her phone with satisfaction. Mission accomplished. Photos to follow. The private investigator she had hired had delivered as promised. Now she just needed to make sure these photos were interpreted in the most damaging way possible. A father and daughter unable to let go of their inappropriate feelings for each other. Patricia dialed a familiar number. Marco, I have something for you. A tip about the Antunes scandal that will guarantee you the front page. In the car, Leonardo and Carolina sat in uncomfortable silence. The driver had been instructed to simply drive around the city until further notice, buying them time to figure out their next move. I'm sorry about what happened back there, Leonardo finally said. It's not your fault, Carolina replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. By agreeing to meet him, had she just made everything worse? Where can I take you? Leonardo asked. Your apartment might be surrounded by now. Carolina hadn't thought of that. I don't know, a hotel maybe? You could. Leonardo hesitated. You could stay at my beach house. It's private, gated. The press wouldn't be able to get to you there. Carolina looked at him in disbelief. You think it's a good idea for us to stay together? After everything? Not together, he clarified quickly. I would stay in the city. The house would be all yours, just somewhere safe until this dies down. The offer was tempting. The thought of returning to her apartment facing the press alone was overwhelming, but accepting his help meant acknowledging their new relationship, taking a step towards something she wasn't sure she was ready for. I'll think about it, she said finally. Leonardo nodded, not pushing further. There's something else we need to discuss. The DNA test confirmed what Elena told us. I am your biological father. I know, Carolina said quietly. My lawyer sent me the results yesterday. I've instructed my legal team to set up a trust fund for you. It's what you should have had all along, what I would have provided if I had known about you. Carolina stiffened. I told you I don't want your money. It's not about what you want, Leonardo said firmly, his tone shifting to something more paternal. It's about what's right. You're my daughter, Carolina, my blood. That means you're an Antunes, whether you like it or not. The words hung in the air between them, changing something fundamental in their dynamic. For the first time, Leonardo wasn't speaking to her as a man who had loved her, but as a father asserting his authority. Carolina wasn't sure how to respond to this new version of him. This is all happening too fast, she said finally. Leonardo's expression softened. I know, but we can't hide from it. Sooner or later, we'll have to figure out what our relationship is going to be. Before Carolina could respond, Leonardo's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. It's Patricia. I should take this. He answered the call, and immediately his face darkened. What? When? He listened intently, then cursed under his breath. I'll call our lawyers right away. He hung up and turned to Carolina, his expression grim. A tabloid is about to publish an article suggesting that we're continuing our romantic relationship despite knowing we're father and daughter. Carolina felt the blood drain from her face. That's disgusting. Why would they say that? Apparently they have photos from our meeting today that they're planning to misinterpret deliberately. Patricia says her contact at the magazine gave her a heads up. Can't you stop them? Sue them? Or something. We can try, but once it's out there, the damage will be done. Leonardo ran a hand through his hair in frustration. This is exactly why I suggested the beach house. You need to be somewhere they can't get to you when this story breaks. Carolina felt trapped. The nightmare was only getting worse. Fine, she said resignedly. The beach house. Just until things calm down. Leonardo gave the driver new instructions, and the car changed direction, heading out of the city toward the coast. As they drove in silence, Carolina stared out the window, watching the urban landscape give way to suburbs and eventually the open road leading to the coast. Her life had become unrecognizable in just a week. Who was she now? What would become of her? At the Antunes corporate headquarters, Patricia was in Leonardo's office, going through his files. With her brother distracted by the scandal, she had the perfect opportunity to make certain adjustments to the company structure. Adjustments that would protect the majority of the family assets from any potential claim by Carolina. As she accessed Leonardo's computer, she found something unexpected. A folder labeled Beatriz. Inside were search results, private investigator reports dating back years. Leonardo had been looking for Beatriz Vasquez long before he ever met Carolina. "Well, well, brother," Patricia murmured. "You've been keeping secrets of your own." The beach house was a modern glass and steel structure perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. As Leonardo's driver pulled up to the gate, Carolina couldn't help but be impressed by the isolated luxury of the place. "The staff has been given the week off," Leonardo explained as they approached the house. "There's plenty of food in the kitchen, and the housekeeper left everything ready for you." Carolina nodded, still not entirely comfortable with the arrangement. "How long do you think I'll need to stay here? Just until the worst of the media frenzy dies down? A week, maybe 2. Leonardo hesitated. "I'd like to come visit, if that's okay with you, to talk, to try to get to know you." Carolina wasn't sure if she was ready for that, but she nodded anyway. "We'll see." Inside, the house was spacious and elegantly appointed, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the ocean. Under different circumstances, it would have been a dream getaway. "Make yourself at home," Leonardo said awkwardly. "My driver will stay in the guest house just in case you need anything." "Thank you," Carolina said, not quite meeting his eyes. As Leonardo prepared to leave, he turned back to her one last time. "Carolina, I know this isn't what either of us wanted or expected, but you are my daughter, and despite everything, I'm grateful to have found you. I just wish it had been under different circumstances." With that, he left, leaving Carolina alone with her thoughts and the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below. That evening, as promised, the tabloid published its sensationalized story. "Forbidden love continues, Antunes and daughter spotted in secret meeting." The accompanying photos showed Leonardo and Carolina sitting close together on the bench, his hand reaching toward her in what could be interpreted as an intimate gesture when taken out of context. The article quoted an anonymous source close to the family claiming that Leonardo and Carolina were struggling to redefine their relationship because of the genuine feelings they had developed for each other. Patricia read the article online with a satisfied smile. Let the world believe that Leonardo was not only a man who had married his own daughter, but one who couldn't let her go even after learning the truth. The ensuing scandal would force him to step down permanently, leaving her in control of the company. What Patricia didn't anticipate was Roberto's reaction. As Leonardo's closest friend and business partner, Roberto had access to the same corporate systems Patricia had been manipulating. When he noticed the unauthorized access to Leonardo's files, he began an investigation of his own. At the beach house, Carolina tried to distract herself from her troubles by exploring the property. In the study, she found family photographs, Leonardo with his parents, Leonardo and Patricia as children, Leonardo receiving business awards. It was strange to see these glimpses of the life she could have been part of. On the desk was a framed photo of a beautiful woman with a kind smile. Leonardo's late wife, Maria, Carolina presumed. The woman she had heard about but never imagined would have been her stepmother in another reality. As she turned to leave the study, Carolina noticed a small box tucked away on a bookshelf. Curiosity got the better of her, and she opened it to find a collection of small mementos, movie ticket stubs, a pressed flower, a handwritten note. With a shock, she recognized her mother's handwriting on the note. "Until we meet again." Love B. Leonardo had kept these things all these years. Had he been in love with her mother, or was this just the sentimental collection of a brief summer romance? Carolina's phone rang, startling her. It was Elena. "Carolina, have you seen the tabloids? It's horrible what they're saying." I haven't looked, Carolina admitted, but Leonardo warned me it would be bad. Where are you now? Your neighbor said reporters are camped outside your apartment building. I'm at Leonardo's beach house. He thought it would be safer for me here. There was a pause on the other end. Be careful, child. Not everyone in the Antunes family will welcome you with open arms. You mean Patricia? Leonardo mentioned she was concerned about the family business. Patricia has always been Victor's daughter in every way, Elena said cryptically. She protects what she believes belongs to her family. After hanging up, Carolina felt a growing unease. She had agreed to come here to escape the press, but had she just placed herself in a different kind of danger? Meanwhile, in the city, Leonardo was meeting with his lawyers, trying to find a way to counter the damaging tabloid story and protect Carolina from further harassment. We can sue for defamation, his head lawyer suggested, but it will mean a long court battle, more publicity. Do whatever it takes, Leonardo insisted. I won't have them dragging her name through the mud like this. As the meeting concluded, Leonardo received a text from Roberto. Need to see you urgently. Found something in the system. P has been making changes without authorization. Leonardo frowned. What was his sister up to now? When he arrived at Roberto's office, his friend looked grim. Patricia has been systematically transferring assets to offshore accounts and restructuring the company to minimize Carolina's potential inheritance. Without my knowledge or approval, Leonardo said, anger building in his voice. There's more, Roberto said hesitantly. I found evidence that she was the one who tipped off the press about your meeting with Carolina today, and she's been in contact with the tabloid that published that disgusting article. Leonardo felt a cold fury building inside him. His own sister had deliberately set out to harm Carolina, to damage their fragile new relationship before it even had a chance to develop. And one more thing, Roberto added, pulling up an email on his computer. This was sent from Patricia's account to her contact at the tabloid. The email contained information about Carolina's whereabouts, the address of the beach house. Leonardo's heart raced with sudden fear. She's sending the press after Carolina at the beach house. He grabbed his phone, dialing Carolina's number frantically. No answer. I need to get there, he told Roberto, already heading for the door. And call our security. Team, tell them to get to the beach house immediately. As night fell over the scenic coastal property, Carolina stood on the balcony, watching the waves in the moonlight. The peaceful scene contrasted sharply with the turmoil inside her. She didn't notice the figures moving through the shadows below, cameras in hand, ready to capture more sensational images for tomorrow's headlines. And in her office, Patricia made one more phone call. Not to the press this time, but to someone far more dangerous. I need you to make sure she gets the message. The Antunes' fortune is not for her to claim. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change all their lives forever. The night at the beach house grew increasingly unsettling for Carolina. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Twice she thought she saw flashes of light outside the windows, but when she looked closer, there was nothing there. She tried calling Leonardo to ask when the security team would arrive, but her call went straight to voicemail. The house suddenly felt too big, too exposed, with its floor-to-ceiling windows. Carolina made sure all the doors were locked and drew the curtains closed. In the guest house, Leonardo's driver, Miguel, was watching a soccer game when his phone rang. It was Leonardo, his voice urgent. Miguel, I need you to check on Carolina immediately. There may be reporters or worse on the property. I'm on my way, but I'm still an hour out. Miguel jumped to his feet. Yes, sir. I'll go right now. As he stepped outside, Miguel noticed movement near the tree line at the edge of the property. Grabbing a flashlight, he cautiously approached, only to be startled by two men with cameras who darted away into the darkness. Hey, stop! Miguel shouted, but they disappeared into the night. Concerned, he hurried to the main house and knocked loudly on the door. Ms. Vasquez? It's Miguel, Mr. Antunes' driver. Are you all right? Carolina cautiously opened the door, relief washing over her face. There's someone outside. I keep seeing flashes. Photographers, Miguel confirmed. Mr. Antunes just called. He's on his way, but he asked me to stay with you until he arrives. Carolina let him in, grateful for the company. How did they find this place? It's so isolated. Miguel looked uncomfortable. I don't know, but Mr. Antunes seemed to think someone may have told them. Carolina thought immediately of Patricia. Elena's warning echoed in her mind. Patricia has always been Victor's daughter in every way. She protects what she believes belongs to her family. On the highway leading to the coast, Leonardo pushed his Ferrari to its limits. His conversation with Roberto had left him deeply disturbed. Patricia wasn't just trying to protect the company. She was actively working to undermine his relationship with Carolina before it could even begin. The tabloid story was bad enough, but the fact that she had given out the location of the beach house crossed a line. What exactly was she hoping to accomplish? His phone rang and he answered through the car's Bluetooth system. It was Roberto again. Leonardo, I've been going through Patricia's emails. There's something you need to know. She's been in contact with someone named Marco Diaz. Do you know him? Leonardo frowned. The name sounds familiar. He's a former security contractor who worked for your father. According to these exchanges, Patricia hired him for some kind of job at the beach house tonight. Leonardo felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of job? She doesn't specify, but it doesn't sound like photography. One message says, "Make sure she gets the message, but nothing traceable back to us." Leonardo pressed harder on the accelerator. Call the police. Tell them to get to the beach house now and keep trying Carolina's phone. Back at the beach house, Carolina and Miguel were startled by the sound of glass breaking at the rear of the house. Stay here, Miguel instructed, grabbing a poker from the fireplace set. Lock the door behind me. As Miguel cautiously made his way toward the source of the noise, Carolina locked the door as instructed, then frantically searched for her phone to call for help. She found it on the coffee table, but there was no signal. A moment later, she heard a shout and then a crash. "Miguel!" she called out, fear gripping her. There was no response. Carolina looked around desperately for a weapon, settling on a heavy crystal vase. She backed away from the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The doorknob turned slowly, then rattled as someone tried to force it open. "Ms. Vasquez," an unfamiliar male voice called out. "We just want to talk." "The police are on their way," Carolina bluffed, her voice stronger than she felt. A low chuckle came from the other side of the door. "No, they're not. Phone lines have been cut and cell service is being jammed. Now be a good girl and open the door." Carolina backed further away. There had to be another way out. The balcony, maybe? But it was at least a 15-foot drop to the ground below. The door shuddered as someone rammed against it. The lock wouldn't hold for long. In a desperate move, Carolina ran to the master bedroom and locked that door too, buying herself a few more minutes. She rushed to the balcony doors, throwing them open. The cool night air hit her face as she looked down at the rocky ground below. It was too far to jump safely. The bedroom door splintered as someone began to break it down. Carolina felt tears of fear and frustration stinging her eyes. Was this Patricia's doing? How could she hate a niece she'd never even met so much? Just as the door gave way, Carolina heard the roar of an engine and saw headlights sweeping across the property. Someone was coming up the driveway fast. A man in dark clothing appeared in the doorway. "Time to go, Ms. Vasquez. I'm not going anywhere with you," Carolina said defiantly, raising the crystal vase. The man smirked. "Ms. Antunes just wants to have a conversation with you about your place in the family." "So Patricia sent you," Carolina confirmed, backing toward the balcony. "What exactly does she expect to accomplish by frightening me?" "She wants you to sign some papers, renouncing any claim to the Antunes fortune or company shares. Do that, and you can go back to your old life." Carolina felt a surge of anger through her fear. "I already told Leonardo I don't want his money. Ms. Antunes doesn't believe that, and she doesn't trust her brother's judgment when it comes to you." The sound of a car door slamming came from outside, followed by running footsteps. "Carolina!" Leonardo's voice called out. The intruder frowned, clearly not expecting interference. He advanced toward Carolina, reaching inside his jacket. In that moment, Leonardo burst into the room, his face a mask of fury when he saw the man approaching his daughter. "Get away from her!" he shouted, launching himself at the intruder. The two men crashed to the floor, struggling violently. The intruder was younger, stronger, but Leonardo fought with the desperate strength of a father protecting his child. Carolina took advantage of the distraction to run from the room, nearly colliding with a police officer in the hallway. "In there," she pointed frantically. "He's attacking my father!" The officer and his partner rushed into the bedroom where Leonardo now had the upper hand, pinning the intruder to the floor. "Marco Diaz," Leonardo spat, recognizing the man as the police pulled him off. "My father's old fixer. Should have known Patricia would call you." Marco said nothing as the police handcuffed him, but his silence was admission enough. In the living room, Carolina found Miguel with an ice pack on his head, looking dazed but conscious. "I'm sorry, Ms. Vasquez," he said. "He caught me by surprise." "It's not your fault," she assured him, her hands still shaking from the ordeal. Leonardo emerged from the bedroom, his face bruised, but his eyes searching only for Carolina. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently. "No, I'm fine," she said, "but he said Patricia sent him to make me sign away any claim to the Antunes' fortune." Leonardo's expression darkened with rage. "She's gone too far this time." A police officer approached them. "Mr. Antunes, we'll need statements from both of you, and we'll need to speak with your sister as well." "I understand," Leonardo said grimly. "How you'll find her at the Antunes Tower penthouse, and tell her I'll be coming for her next." As the police took Marco away and paramedics checked on Miguel, Leonardo and Carolina were left alone in the living room of the now damaged beach house. "I'm so sorry," Leonardo said, his voice breaking. "This is all my fault. I thought you'd be safe here." Carolina shook her head. "It's not your fault. It's Patricia's. She's always been obsessed with protecting the family legacy, just like our father." Leonardo ran a hand through his hair. "But to go this far, she was willing to frighten me, maybe even hurt me just to keep me from getting any of the Antunes' money," Carolina said, still processing the reality of having an aunt who hated her so much without ever meeting her. "Money, I've been trying to give you anyway," Leonardo pointed out with grim irony. Despite everything, Carolina found herself laughing, a slightly hysterical sound born of relief and the absurdity of the situation. "We're quite a family, aren't we?" Leonardo's expression softened, and for the first time since the wedding revelation, he smiled. A small, sad smile, but genuine nonetheless. "We are, aren't we? Not exactly the introduction to the Antunes family I would have chosen for you." A police officer entered to inform them that Patricia had been taken in for questioning. The tabloid photographers who had been caught on the property were also being processed for trespassing. "What happens now?" Carolina asked once they were alone again. "Now we pick up the pieces," Leonardo said simply. "If you're willing." Carolina wasn't sure what that meant, but she nodded. After tonight, something had shifted between them. The trauma of the attack had burned away some of the awkwardness, leaving in its place a tentative bond. Not romantic love, but perhaps the beginning of a different kind of love. The love of a father for his daughter and a daughter for her father. 3 months later, the Antunes Foundation headquarters buzzed with activity as staff prepared for the annual charity gala. In her new office, Carolina reviewed the final guest list, making notes in the margins. A knock at the door made her look up. Leonardo stood there, looking more like his old self than he had in months. "Ready for your first gala as the Foundation's director?" Carolina smiled. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Are you sure the board is okay with having me in charge?" "The board answers to me," Leonardo reminded her, "and you've more than proven yourself these past months." After the incident at the beach house, Carolina had accepted Leonardo's offer to head the family's charitable foundation. It gave her a purpose, a way to use the Antunes name for good, while maintaining enough distance from Leonardo to continue healing from their complicated past. "Have you heard from Patricia?" Carolina asked carefully. Leonardo's expression darkened. "My lawyers have negotiated a deal. She'll avoid jail time if she stays away from both of us and relinquishes her position in the company. She's moving to Europe next week." Carolina nodded, relieved. The scandal of Patricia hiring someone to intimidate her had been kept out of the press thanks to Leonardo's influence, but the family rift was permanent. "And how are you doing?" Leonardo asked, studying her face. "Really? Better," Carolina said honestly. "The therapy is helping. Dr. Mendez says it's normal to still feel confused sometimes about everything." "I'm glad," Leonardo said. "I've been seeing someone too. It helps to talk about it." Their relationship was still evolving, still fragile in many ways. They had both needed professional help to process the trauma of discovering their true connection after nearly marrying each other. But they were making progress, learning to know each other in their proper roles. "Elena is coming tonight," Carolina mentioned, changing the subject. "She's very excited about the Foundation's new focus on supporting single mothers." Leonardo smiled. "I look forward to seeing her. She gave us both a great gift, you know. The truth may have come in the worst possible way, but at least it came." Carolina nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking a lot about my mother lately, about why she kept the secret for so long. What have you concluded? That she was trying to protect me in the only way she knew how. She was afraid of your father, afraid of losing me." Carolina paused. "I'm still angry sometimes, but I'm trying to forgive her." "As am I," Leonardo admitted. "If I had known about you, I would have moved heaven and earth to be in your life, Carolina. You have to believe that." "I do," she said, simply. A comfortable silence fell between them, so different from the painful, awkward silences of their early meetings after the wedding disaster. "I should finish getting ready," Carolina said eventually. "Daniela is bringing my dress over in an hour." "Of course," Leonardo said, turning to leave. At the door he paused. "Carolina, I'm proud of you, not just for taking on the Foundation, but for how you've handled everything these past months. You truly are an Antunes." Carolina smiled, touched by his words. "Thank you, Dad." It was the first time she had called him that, and Leonardo's eyes widened in surprise before filling with tears. He nodded, unable to speak, and left quickly to hide his emotion. Carolina turned back to her work, her own eyes damp. It wasn't a perfect ending. There was too much pain, too many lost years for that. But it was a beginning. That evening, the Antunes Foundation Gala was in full swing. The ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel, the same one where the ill-fated wedding had taken place, had been transformed with different decorations, as if to symbolize the transformation in their lives. As Carolina prepared to give her first speech as Foundation Director, she caught Leonardo's eye across the room. He gave her an encouraging nod, and she felt a surge of confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and strong. "The past year has taught me many things, but perhaps the most important is this. Family is not defined just by blood, but by love, by choices, by forgiveness." In the audience, Elena dabbed at her eyes, watching the father and daughter with satisfaction. Beatrice would be proud, she thought. Despite everything, her daughter had found her father and he had found his daughter. Leonardo listened to Carolina's speech with pride swelling in his chest. She spoke with passion about the Foundation's new initiatives, about second chances, and new beginnings. She was a natural leader just like him, just like an Antunes. When the speech concluded to enthusiastic applause, Leonardo approached her. "That was perfect," he said. "Thank you," Carolina replied, smiling. "I had a good teacher." A photographer approached, asking to take their picture for the society pages. A few months ago, such a request would have filled them both with dread. Now Leonardo simply asked, "Carolina, would that be all right with you?" She nodded and they posed side by side, no longer pretending to be what they were not, but embracing what they truly were, father and daughter, finding their way forward. Together. "Ms. Antunes," the photographer said, using the name that Carolina had recently adopted legally. "Yes?" Both Carolina and Leonardo answered simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. It wasn't the love story either of them had imagined. It was something different, something harder won but perhaps more meaningful. A relationship born from scandal and pain, but growing now in truth and healing. As they moved through the gala together, accepting congratulations and making small talk with donors, they looked to all the world like what they were, family. The secret was no longer forbidden but embraced, the truth no longer hidden but celebrated. And in a quiet corner of the ballroom, Elena raised her glass in a private toast to Beatrice. "IOC, my friend. It all worked out in the end. The scandal that had rocked society and threatened to destroy them both had in the end given them the greatest gift of all, the family they were always meant to be." As the music played and the Evening continued. Leonardo and Carolina shared a moment of quiet understanding. The past could not be changed, but the future was theirs to write. Together, as father and daughter, they would create a new legacy for the Antunes name, one built on truth, forgiveness, and love. "To new beginnings," Leonardo said, raising his glass to Carolina. "To family," she replied, clinking her glass against his. And somewhere, perhaps, Beatrice smiled, knowing that her daughter had finally found her father, and he had found his daughter, even if the path that led them to each other had been the most unexpected one imaginable. The end.